And all right, now we've got 2028. Let's see, are people filing in? Okay, all right, yeah, so they'll all start coming in now. Cool. We've got stuff there. All right, I'm guessing. Oh, yeah, I'll make it do this here. Got it. Okay, there we go. All right. What's your time? Couple minutes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Wondering on that video recording what probably happened if we're the primary source of the noise, it'll be showing here. So that'll be amazing. All right. Well, I think we're ready. All right, everyone ready here? I'll go. I know Bill wasn't able to make it this morning, but so I kind of fill in right now. My name is Sean Simmons. I'm president of the Canadian International Council Prince George branch, and I'm really excited today to feature remotely Sam Cooper, who's going to be talking about foreign interference. This is a unique situation in that we've got an event here in person, but we've also got an event online. So we have people tuning in from across the country. So it's always a little tricky doing these hybrid events, but I think we've got things lined up. I think before I introduce Sam, I want to introduce a little bit of an idea that I've been working on with the CIC branch on how we can encourage more, I guess, support for a lot of investigative journalism. I know we ask folks like Sam to come and talk to us on a regular basis, and they volunteer their time and their expertise. And certainly it's a challenge for most investigative journalists in that the traditional institutions that they've relied on for their income have been pretty much in a state of free fall for the last few decades. And one of the bright lights is Substack, where writers can actually set up their own miniature publishing house and charge subscriptions. So we were thinking maybe this is a way that we can help support investigative journalism by starting a Substack speakers program. And so this is the pilot for this program. And to kind of supercharge this, our branch is going to buy basically a table of 10 subscriptions from Sam Cooper's Substack called The Bureau. And we'll see if this is a way to help support investigative journalism in Canada. And I certainly would challenge anyone online, and certainly anyone in the audience who would like to support the work that Sam's doing, sign up to the Bureau, and Sam's got it up online right now as well. So I just wanted to make that pitch, and certainly put a challenge out to anyone else online. We're going to have 10 subscriptions to Sam's Bureau. Let's see if anyone can beat us. So without further ado, I guess a couple of little housekeeping items. So Sam's going to talk for about half an hour, and then we'll do some Q&A, and we'll alternate it back between the audience here and the audience online. And so if you're in Zoom, make sure you type in your questions into the online chat. So about Sam. So Sam is an award-winning investigative journalist and best-selling author who has presented his anti-corruption findings to Canadian law enforcement agencies, officials in the Pentagon, financial and legal professionals, and academics. Cooper graduated with a degree in history, philosophy, and English from the University of Toronto and a certificate in journalism from Langara College. Before reporting for the province, the Vancouver Sun, and Global News, he has won a number of awards for narrative reporting, and his first book, Willful Blindness, and I highly recommend, it's a real page turner. His first book, Willful Blindness, debuted as a #1 bestseller on Amazon in Canada. Away from work, Cooper's riding a cycle, snowboarding, cross-country skiing, and shooting hoops. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks so much, Sean, and everyone out on the West Coast. I'm appreciative that you've met me early in your morning, my time. Not quite as early, but probably a little colder here in Ottawa. So yes, I plan to speak for about 30 minutes, not in a highly regimented way, but I plan to share my desktop with you and take you there and the online audience that is with us through some of my thoughts, investigations, and I really plan to give you the story behind the story. Many of you hopefully have read my book as a, well, yeah, that's the right way. Sean kindly introduced it. The research that went into willful blindness is over 10 years of my work that started in Vancouver, as some of you probably know, just really trying to understand massive floods of offshore money coming into real estate. That led to findings in BC government casinos. My career in Vancouver then migrated to Ottawa, and I'm not afraid to say that I anticipated by going to Central Canada, I would start to understand more the power centers of Montreal, Quebec City, Ottawa, and Toronto. And my theory and my strong belief, also some of my guidance from sources, was that there was a long-running sort of hidden relationship with very elite families in China that really is at the bottom of this interference story in Canada. So the focus topic of my discussion today is the story behind the election interference story that you and much of Canada hopefully has at least a good base level knowledge of after the past year of my reporting, and of course also the Globe and Mail, and encouragingly other media outlets are now jumping in with further reports that I would say are adding to what I wrote in Willful Blindness, in the sense that Kelvin Krusty, a former RCMP officer, I believe he's tuned in today, has given me the credit that Canada's government was very reticent to acknowledge that both Chinese espionage and interference networks were deep into our institutions and have been for decades. And the key fact that I think as Calvin says, pushed our government to acknowledge, and they have started acknowledging increasingly, is that transnational organized crime are really very much connected to the foreign interference story. So as I say, the story behind the story is how I say centrally involved international gangs that are based at the highest level in China, but are operating internationally and work together as need be for them on objectives with domestic criminal outlets in Canada, international cartels from Latin America and Mexico, Middle Eastern organized crime groups that are using Canada, as I've recently been reporting on the Bureau, to sell drugs and launder the money for terror financing that can be directly connected to the tragedy happening in the Middle East right now. So I always like to, a lot of my research is very visual in a way. As I explain in Willful Blindness, pictures do indeed tell thousands of words worth of stories. And I think it'll be good for me to just show you some pictures and talk about the level of people I'm talking about and their involvement in Canada. And I'll say this very strong caveat. Aside from a few people that I'll mention, these people have not been criminally charged or prosecuted in Canada. And yet, as I've reported in the Bureau very recently, experts say, were we to live in the United States, were we to have an FBI operating on our problems, I'm going to assert right now that a few of the people that you will see pictures of most certainly would be subject of charges, likely for Chinese Communist Party police stations, and how those Chinese Communist Party police stations connect to egregious interference and intimidation of Canada's Asian diaspora community. And on the flip side, how these very same sort of directors in very fluid networks of Chinese Communist Party police stations, brick and mortar outlets in Canada, are very much directly involved in the election interference and fundraising story. Let me backtrack for a moment. Sean, very kindly invited me to contribute, and with the benefit to me that I can tell you about what I'm doing now. Again, I think my book, Willful Blindness, launched me on a path towards independent investigative journalism and entrepreneurship in a way. I've traveled to Taiwan in the first few months of my operations to cover an international story, that is China's threats to that very proud and well-administered nation of Taiwan. But what I want to say is that, as Sean said, I am reporting weekly, I would say, consequential stories on the Substack platform. You can see it there if you're following along on screen. My outlet is called The Bureau. Here it's laid out. But you have I'm going to say the privilege today to be the first ones to see that I also have a website that is not on Substack. It's built for the Bureau. It's ready to go. This is not to say that I'm leaving Substack, but with my supporters, I already have the technology in place to jump over to a website if need be, or to keep doing what I'm doing on Substack. It's all going to be the Bureau, Canada's new investigative journalism outlet. So let's jump over, backtrack in time a little bit here. I want to set the framework here that, the absolute golden rule of journalism, investigative journalism, of course, is follow the money, because when you follow the money, you're following the power. And you're understanding why things work the way they do in the world, really at the basic level. So as I indicated already, I started to understand the foreign interference occurring in Canada first by understanding international organized crime and money laundering in Vancouver. And as some of you know, my work, along with others, again, I won't be falsely modest. I do believe, some say I'm like a dog with a bone sometimes, but my digging into Vancouver money laundering did help lead to the Cullen Commission, which we haven't seen any of the recommended legal reforms yet, I don't believe, but there is a template in place from the Cullen Commission to understand, just the egregious level of money laundering happening on Canada's West Coast. And by the way, happening in exact same ways, perhaps at a greater scale in Toronto and in Ontario, and how this is impacting Canada's society. Beyond that, how it's facilitating the fentanyl crisis in Canada, and as I'm arguing today, very much connected to foreign interference. But a data point I want to share, to me, the Cullen Commission was very valuable. It gave us figures that I could only postulate and guesstimate at. I think I did pretty well when I said I'm confident in saying that a few billion in value has been laundered through BC government casinos in the past decade. I said this, in my book in 2021. And the Cullen Commission came out and they showed me that I was on the right track, but I was low in my estimates. What you see me highlighting on my screen was a finding from Commissioner Cullen that in 2014 alone, the peak year of transnational organized crime money laundering through BC government casinos, there was 1.2 billion, that's billion with a B, in suspicious large cash transactions. Essentially, all of those connected to this, basically 99% or more connected to foreign or very lightly attached to Canada gamblers coming from East Asia and most specifically mainland China, and using the Vancouver model to launder money in and out of Canada. Most of you tuned in already know about the Cullen Commission and the Vancouver model, but the point I want to make here is that the scale of money flooding into Canada's business centers, Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, but we can also talk about Windsor, Ontario, we can talk about London, Ontario, we can talk about Halifax, Prince Edward Island, across Canada, money that's connected to strategic foreign state interference and transnational crime money laundering. Most specifically, I'm concerned about China, Iran, and Russia. The scale coming into Canada is incredible. So we're talking about BC here, 1.2 billion in Vancouver Vancouver model cash, drug money laundering. Some of that money would also be, human trafficking, child exploitation, cybercrime likely, Again, I won't go on and on. You see my point. 1.2 billion large cash transactions in 1 year through British Columbia provincial casinos. The mind boggles. You cannot get over the enormity of that statistic. But as I've reported this past week in the Bureau, the very man who was working for the BC Gaming Enforcement Branch and had given me encouragement to keep following my real estate investigations in late 2016, then briefed our current premier, David Eby, who was back then the Attorney General. The man I'm talking about is named Scott McGregor. He briefed David Eby in 2017 and told him, as I reported last week, this is not about casino money laundering. According to Scott McGregor, who's an associate of Calvin Krusty, who hopefully is watching along with you today, the contention of Scott and others that are very currently involved in high-level RCMP investigations is this money flooding into BC casinos and real estate and critical infrastructure, plots of land beside our critical infrastructure, pieces of our ports, especially in Vancouver. I'm looking forward to report more on that. This is what we call sometimes in China white gloves. That is very wealthy tycoons or business persons with connections to organized crime that are both profiting by laundering money into Canada to launder drug money, but also strategically, under the guidance of Chinese intelligence arms, are buying up Canadian assets. So my point here is that when we're talking about billions of criminal cash, criminal funds coming into Canada, we have to connect it to foreign states. If we don't, we're already wide open to this abuse. And I'm glad that there's more reporting and more official sources of information coming out now that are saying the RCMP is 100% not equipped as a federal force to tackle foreign interference, transnational money laundering, terror financing. That's not to say that the RCMP and CSIS are not full of intelligent people that are very aware of the threats. That is to say that they are not equipped with the laws that responsible nations like the United States and Australia have in place to tackle foreign threat actors and foreign criminal transnational organizations, which is the focus of my research. So let's just get into the pictures who I'm going to talk about. So when I talked about, what is happening in Vancouver, I, as well as Scott McGregor, I'm going to point your eyes to the man in the lower corner. My cursor is not disrespectfully, but pointing towards him as he looks like he's biting into a good cut of steak there, sitting beside our Prime Minister, who is sitting beside a former Liberal multiculturalism minister at the federal level named Raymond Chan. The title of this story, which was in the Bureau the last week, and which was an in-depth interview with Scott McGregor, is Justin Trudeau targeted in United Front corruption networks? The answer is yes. And as I say, when we see photographs of our Prime Minister, whether before he was a leader, whether just when he became a leader back in 2012, 2013, whether in 2016, which was a high watermark of the targeting of our Prime Minister in Cash for Access fundraisers, when we see him beside, some individuals that on the surface would claim to be wealthy permanent residents of Canada who have made their wealth in China and are now contributing to our economy. Unfortunately, RCMP knows and CSIS knows very differently that men such as Tiger Yuan, again, not facing any criminal charges, however, is facing very current RCMP national security investigations. These men are involved in funneling donations to our Prime Minister as well as other politicians. However, it's what they're involved in outside of their legitimate business interests that concern the RCMP. And so Mr. Yuan, you see him there, we'll come back to him. I just want to flip before I get in more to Mr. Yuan, I want to talk once more about the man that I was told is the subordinate of Mr. Tiger Yuan, and that's a person you're familiar with if you've read the book Willful Blindness. His name is Paul King-Jin. And what alarmed me and fascinated me in my findings in that book, which are now supported by Cullen Commission documents, is that Paul King-Jin's personal lawyer was a Richmond real estate lawyer named Han Guo. Guo I had been following for a number of years in my Vancouver research, and why she was of interest. It fascinated me that she told me in an interview that her law firm had conveyed something, in the order of 700 million in real estate transactions in 1 year. This is for residential, but she also was traveling the province with a former Liberal federal politician who became a mayor, I believe, in Coquitlam, and they were looking for port deals, jade deals, resource deals of all kinds. And this is really interesting because she was also had connections to the Chinese state, and she is running, she's come up in BC Law Society investigations as running, the major amounts of money into Canada in the provincial nominee investment program. And yet it came out in the case that many of the clients that Ms. Guo was helping to invest in Canada were not involved in real businesses. The purpose, according to the Law Society's examinations, which I'm not sure are complete yet, but the purpose was to get money out of China and into Canada around capital controls. So a form of underground banking. Again, the point here is that she is not just a real estate lawyer. She was, the Cullen Commission records show, the lawyer for Paul Jin, who was using her office. Again, Paul Jin, I'm assuming most of you know his name if you followed the book. If not, read the book and look into my some of my many stories. Paul Jin, a very high-level convicted criminal involved in international Chinese transnational crime activity, and the key figure in laundering, in facilitating, a key figure in facilitating this laundering of tremendous amounts of funds into BC casinos. So when I remember that 1.2 billion figure, that's what I'm talking about. Paul Jin, one of the main alleged underground bankers involved in BC government casino money laundering, and working with Han Guo, who, why am I interested in Han Guo? Because not only is she allegedly using her law office in these underground banking activities, but if you're a close follower of BC politics, you'll recall that when Man Wanzhou was arrested, I believe it's late 2019, in the Huawei case, Han Guo and several other people held a press conference in Richmond. It was connected to what are known as high-level United Front Work Department community groups in British Columbia that are connected to Beijing. And the statements of Ms. Guo and others were essentially that Canada had no right to follow through on the US extradition case for Man Wanzhou. I'll leave it at that. What I'm suggesting is she, either under her own volition for the motherland or under direction for the United Front, stepped forward to put information into the Canadian discourse that would go against Canada upholding the rule of law. That is, China and many other people in Canada that were working for China wanted Man Wanzhou to be released with no consequences. And so the other point is, if you followed politics closely, you realized Han Guo ran for mayor of Richmond in 2018. Richmond, a very important center of Chinese state activity. And so you have a person who, now that we can see the evidence in front of you, involved in what looks like sort of fraudulent business investments involving underground banking in British Columbia, chasing around the province, looking for big port deals, looking for resource deals for Chinese investors. And the evidence shows the lawyer of choice for this international triad operator, Paul King-Jin. So I'm suggesting that this, when we look at the big business players in our cities, unfortunately, some of them are under the direct influence of Chinese intelligence operators or consulate officials. I'm going to flip forward to a little bit more on Mr. Jin. It's important to know that when we're talking about this money flooding into BC casinos, the evidence shows this is fentanyl money in many cases, especially recently, and who's involved. One of the people that I focused on in my book, my sources said was connected to Chinese police activity, and yet it's hard to understand sometimes in Canada. You can be on one side involved in Chinese policing networks, and yet you can also be accused of being an international loan shark. I'm going to go to my other record just to make sure I'm supported by my evidence here. And on the other hand, you can be accused of being a precursor drug importer involved in bringing, harmful as some people would call them, toxic opioids into this province. And so the pictures that I found from the Cullen Commission were very helpful. Here we have a few individuals that it's not important that we name them at this time. There's another picture of remember the man that was sitting beside Prime Minister Trudeau, who donated to Prime Minister Trudeau. Here he's standing beside the Richmond MP, Joe Pescasolido, at a United Front community event in the Richmond, Vancouver area. But I want to lean on my casino suspect photos again. If you can just draw your eyes to the upper corner where my cursor is, here is another BC Lottery Corporation internal investigation set of photographs that came out in the Cullen Commission. We have this man named Bai Zhan Zhao on the right. Now draw your eyes to another 2016 Cash for Access fundraiser that was reported on in Canadian media. We have our Prime Minister in the middle there. And where my cursor is, just over a few to our Prime Minister's left, again, the same individual, Bai Zhan Zhao. At our far left, a businessman who was cited in a major New Zealand money laundering case, who happened to be an investor in a hotel in Toronto. We have other individuals, the man shaking our Prime Minister's hand, part of a group close or directly connected to the United Front group in Vancouver that is currently under Chinese Communist Police Station investigations, and that is called Wenzhou Friendship Society, connected to what international researchers would call Xi Jinping's magic weapon of foreign interference. And again, that is the United Front Work Department. So why is our Prime Minister in these Cash for Access meetings, meeting wealthy business persons, some of them Canadian citizens, some of them not, but people that are there to donate, and yet they weren't at the time, they're now targeted in RCMP national security investigations. Some of them at the time were money laundering suspects. And what sources such as Scott McGregor and others would say is that these meetings are very strategic in purpose. It's not just that these people are wanting to improve their political lot in Canada out of personal motivation. There is motivation and direction from Chinese intelligence agencies beside and behind these meetings. So we're getting to the point where I'd like to open it up for discussion and some of your questions. But before we do, I just want to show that it's not just myself that is uncovering the United Front Work Department and its operations in Canada, there's already a very well documented and proven template that we can see in Hong Kong. The screen that I'm showing you right now shows the person that I call the prototypical whale gambler in Canada. His name was Lai Chang-Zing. He was operating Fujian transnational crime networks that were really, of course, they were involved in, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, all the usual activities of very high-level Chinese transnational crime. But Mr. Lai had reached such a level that he controlled an oil company, or on the surface, he controlled an oil company that was doing multi-billions of dollars in trade and assets. And on the surface, you can say, what's an international criminal doing controlling sort of a state-linked oil company? But the point here is that it's not just him operating it. He is what we call a white gloves, who is a very wealthy business person that can control entities linked to the Chinese state and go around the world doing business, and while doing business can ensnare business persons in other nations that China is trying to influence. And what the point of Mr. Lai here in this, I'm taking this from an excellent report called Black Gold. This is from a United Kingdom-based think tank that has a lot of connections to Western intelligence research. And what the report shows is that people that essentially filled the gap after Mr. Lai was arrested in Canada and subject of a major extradition operation, which a lot more could be said about that, but I don't want to get into that case. The point is, these men illustrated who are Fujian international, high-level business persons, but they're not just that. According to this report, they are high-level organized crime operators involved in the international oil trade, some of them who have set up in Hong Kong. Here we have one of the individuals, and they, according to this report, are directly connected to Beijing's Chinese Communist Party, United Front Work Department activity to get involved in politics in Hong Kong, and also to get involved in, remember I talked about the egregious intimidation and efforts to control diaspora communities in democratic nations. Hong Kong, no longer can be called close to a democracy. But the very alarming thing here is that, according to this report, people under these individuals in Hong Kong are the ones that were involved in beating democracy protesters in Hong Kong in 2019. And so I'll end, my spiel here before taking some questions and conversation, and say that an important thing that I found, again, in Vancouver, we could see the same activity and the same types of networks. That is, people that are seen very frequently meeting with Chinese consulate officials in Vancouver, people that are seen very frequently meeting at these United Front gatherings with high-level international crime operators involved in the BC government casino laundering. These same people could be connected to what were called counter rallies that stemmed from the geopolitical turmoil in Hong Kong and spilled over into Vancouver streets in Vancouver and Toronto, where we saw Hong Kong democracy protesters out. Some of them were praying, some of them were simply waving the flag for democracy, and yet they were countered in aggressive ways by people outside, in this case, a church in Vancouver, by the very same networks I'm pointing to. That is, people that can be connected to the Chinese Communist Party police station investigations, people that can be connected to real estate and casino money laundering investigations, and people that I'm saying, the story behind the story hasn't come out, people that can be connected very directly to election interference financing for years in Canada, but very specifically in recent federal, municipal, and provincial elections. And I'll have a lot more to report on this issue, but I think I've shown you a range of, in a nutshell, as I say, when we see our prime minister in a number of these photos standing beside individuals that are running underground casinos, individuals that are directors of United Front Work Department community groups in Canada that hold meetings and receive taxes from attendees. This is the funding of operations, not only to donate to our prime minister, perhaps premiers, mayors across Canada, but people that are collecting taxes from, unfortunately, people involved in legal and illegal activity to fund operations targeting Canada in many different ways, not only election interference. So I've given you a range, and I may flip back to my photographs during questions, but I'm happy to give up the floor and take some questions and I guess have some conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. So we're going to alternate between questions here and questions online. So I'll open it up first to Winston's. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for your information. For quite a number of years, occasionally the economic development arm of the city of Prince George has hosted plane loads or bus loads of Chinese investors who they get some realtors involved and they go around and look at investment opportunities in the city of Prince George. Is it likely that the people that you're talking about are these people that are coming here to look at real estate?
Yes, the simple answer is yes, but I'll qualify that by saying that not in all cases do we can we say. Certainly I would say that very often people from China and Hong Kong are involved in legitimate government approved investment. However, I'm not going to mince words. I've just taken you through some cases. Remember, I said that the BC Law Society has now proven or alleged, it's not a criminal sort of case, but they have said that this Richmond real estate lawyer, who I've named, Hong Guo, was involved in a number of fraudulent BC PMP programs. That is, people running around the province in some of these tours that you're talking about were not, buying legitimate sawmills or commercial buildings. Maybe they were in some cases, but there were a number of sham businesses set up so that these individuals could get money into British Columbia. The money went underground. That is, it wasn't approved by China's government. It went through Vancouver model channels, that is around China's capital controls, and Canada either turned a blind eye to it or didn't approve that money, whatever the case, because we don't have the laws to really even regulate that activity. But I'm saying another data point, as I said, I became interested in Hong Guo when I started to read BC provincial Supreme Court filings that said her and other individuals were running around the province with Canadian municipal politicians, and this former politician, I believe his name is Lou Sikora, looking for major port deals. I believe Prince Rupert, I don't know for a fact if Prince George was on their magical, provincial resource tour, but I certainly know because I talked to some mayors around the province, and one at least was up north. Sorry, I don't mean to say up north, was in the northern region of British Columbia, did say that they received, Hong Guo and her entourage to look at a port deal. And so I won't ramble on. My answer is yes, not only is there a likelihood, but there's certainly many proven cases where some of the people involved in these tours to BC municipalities are involved in underground banking transfers. And as I've really argued, this is not just personal enrichment or motivated by, a lot of well-earned money abroad and then seeking to add to Canada's economy. In some cases, this is strategically motivated. As our director of CSIS, David Vigneault, has recently said, CSIS has stepped in and stopped the acquisition of lands beside Canada's, critical infrastructure. So in a lot of cases, there are concerns with the activity you're seeing.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. We have a question online, Lorna Jane.
So we have a question from Robert Vincent online saying, all of this evidence of transgressions are fascinating to be sure, but what have you learned about efforts to counter the activities of those involved in what are clearly criminal activities? Has anyone been kicked out of the country? Have there been any arrests? Are access for money attendees screened by CSIS or the RCMP?
Yeah, now I can answer that question without leaning on, my research and my theories and my understanding. Now we can go to official sources and say that no, nothing is happening very broadly. Canada isn't equipped. This week, my former employer, Global News, one of my former colleagues, came out with a good report, the very first report on the release of the National Security and Intelligence Panel's most recent report on RCMP federal policing. And what the report found was that our national force, for various reasons, including resourcing, including focus, I believe including, because of our flawed legal framework, is not equipped to effectively counter the very complex mixture of serious crimes facing Canada, coming from transnational crime, coming from espionage, coming from foreign interference, coming from terror financing, and coming from violent extremism, I believe, whether it be on the left or the right or across the board. There's all kinds of nefarious actors, many of them connected to foreign states, that are having a wide open run at Canada's economy, Canada's political electoral system from top to bottom. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read the November 7th new NSI COP reports. And I'll add that it's coming out in the Cameron Ortis trial. I know some of you have been following my reports for the Bureau, that again, Canada, the RCMP, are following these very serious networks in Toronto, Vancouver, Prince George. I'm sure they're there, Montreal. We have all the intelligence on these groups because both of our own good work from CSIS and the RCMP in Canada, and probably more importantly, due to our access to Five Eyes intelligence. But really, it's without exaggeration, Canada is not equipped to prosecute these crimes. And, we could find maybe in a few cases, a serious international foreign supported criminal involved in human trafficking that may have been deported. But these are one-off cases. We can't point to a high-level money laundering or foreign interference or Chinese police station, prosecution or indictment. Unlike the United States and Australia, month by month is coming out with major money laundering prosecutions of the very same networks I'm talking about. That is I believe, the most prevalent international organized crime and money laundering groups out of Asia that are deeply involved in this United Front activity. Australia's getting it done and Canada's doing nothing.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. All right, question, Ken?
Thank you very much for being here this morning, Mr. Cooper. I hope you're going to remember Sean for promoting your book for you, because I went and bought it and I've read it and I was quite intrigued by it and disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
You say you publish is around the N95 masks and the COVID scare. And I'd like to ask you to expand and maybe inform the rest of our privilege about the role of United Front and acquiring masks in North America and Europe, and the timelines thereof. I found that to be significant.
Yeah, not to mention the court or the legal challenges you faced afterwards getting sued for reporting on that. So, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I understood most of the question, and that's a case that is on my mind continuously, because when we talk about United Front Work Department and Chinese intelligence interference in other nations, what is really happening is through, the Chinese Communist Party's brutal control of the population in mainland China. They have extended that, unfortunately, into diaspora communities in Italy, the United Kingdom, France, a little bit in Germany, Canada, deeply, perhaps, equal or worse, Australia and New Zealand, just a stunning and concerning level of interference, again, through international, very often international organized crime groups based in Fujian province, based in Hong Kong, other area, northern China. The people that run international gangs and still have connectivity to their hometowns in areas of China and Hong Kong we can call them, if we're using the Italian mafia sort of comparison, capos or commanders that are used regionally in Canada. Let's just focus on Canada, but are directed by China's Ministry of Public Security officials or Ministry of State Security. In some cases, the People's Liberation Army, scary people are mixed in there. My point is, China, unfortunately, can gather what it wants, when it wants in Canada, whether that be intellectual properties from universities, leveraging students who are under the control of these United Front networks and intelligence operatives and crime bosses. So students can be sent to the nomination meetings of our political candidates in Canada and told who to vote for. But as you say, also in a once in 100, 200-year crisis, when nursing homes in Canada are short of protective masks and our seniors are facing death, China can employ, unfortunately, those United Front networks who are directed by criminals in Canada and intelligence operatives and tell them, go shopping, go to Rona, wherever you can, and buy every mask you can find. And then you're going to bring it back to a central collection area. You're going to do a grip and grin with our Chinese consulate official, with your local gangster in front of all these boxes as if it's a good thing. And then we're going to put them on pallets and ship them to Fujian province to be received by the United Front Work Department. And so I'm still rational here, but I'm getting a little emotional because Canadian seniors died because of that activity and our government let it happen. And these, in my book, I do write that, let's go back to Mr. Jin of the Shandong, United Front community group in Vancouver. The open source records do show us that this person, this convict was involved in buying up and donating PPE back to China. So I think I've said enough, but the comparison I'm making here, and I hope some of my friends at CSIS are watching, is it's not just a concern that Chinese crime and intelligence networks can ship high-end computer chips or for the tips of missiles, using Canada to run that product from California up into Canada where we're weak and send it to China. No, it's a concern that when our population faces, whatever caused the pandemic to spread, that we lack something very low tech but useful can be sucked up and sent to another country, and that's United Front Work Department mass collection activity.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Online, we have another question.
So this one is from Leonard Jenks. He says, is there any evidence that the Prime Minister and or the Liberal Party is involved with China beyond simply being naive?
Yeah, well, I want to preface what I'm going to say by, it's very clear at this point that the evidence does show that for various reasons, and I've reported most recently, for the Bureau that they could go back to the Prime Minister's father and Jean Chrétien, very especially, and successive prime ministers in the Liberal Party, who is the most successful and, is in office, controls the country most often, 70 to 80% of the time. So of course they will be most targeted and most vulnerable for various reasons. One could be because self-admittedly, the Liberal Party is more friendly towards China and made major geopolitical and foreign policy, foreign affairs mistakes, whether through naiveness or corruption. That's just a fact. But what I want to stress is, please don't get the idea I'm picking on the Liberal Party. They face the biggest vulnerability. They also have some that party has knowledgeable, well-informed, patriotic politicians that care, that don't want to be corrupted, whether through ignorance or complicit activity. But what I'm saying here is that let's not be comfortable that our leaders across the political party scale in British Columbia are not targeted very heavily. I'll be getting into that more. Across Canada, every party is targeted in very sophisticated operations. To the question, is there corruption? Is our Prime Minister simply not equipped with the knowledge and capacity that his father had? If his father was in his shoes right now, I would say that it's corruption, because Pierre Trudeau, whatever your opinion, is very clearly a lawyer, and a very high-level lawyer, and a statesman. Someone of that, brilliance could not be hoodwinked. It's possible that his son could be hoodwinked or not very, hasn't absorbed what CSIS Director David Vigneault has repeatedly told him. We can now say, because this November 7th NSICOP redacted report does say that organized crime and foreign interference are not separate. So our Prime Minister knows that. He's read the report. He can look at these pictures that I'm showing today and think back and say, well, I'm sure that I know that person that I'm shaking hands with is now the subject of a Chinese Communist police station investigation. Did I make a mistake? Was it corrupt? I can't say that, but I can say that there are people at a high level in Canada around the Prime Minister that have to know that it's a concern that some of the most powerful and dangerous criminals in this country have gotten very close, very influential in that party. Let's just say it for what it is. Can they be influencing policy? It's getting harder to, because hopefully, my work and others is putting more and more of a spotlight on this. But I do believe corruption has occurred, and hopefully my work is partly driven by a sense of duty that I've been saying for years now that we lack a racketeering law, we lack foreign interference law, therefore we are targeted by the most powerful and worst, crime and intelligence combined networks in the world that are using Canada without any counter, essentially. And so why has that not changed? I could go on and on. If I were running the country, it would have been changed years ago.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Okay, all right, Trudy?
Yeah. So just a quick question. So is there a place to get a fact sheet or things to watch for local government? I'm a new city councillor, and I'm especially concerned. You talked, and then maybe, so that's a separate question maybe, and then additionally, the human trafficking. Could you talk a little bit about that and what that looks like especially in Canada and BC?
Sure. Great questions. And I'm glad to, I'm honored that you're asking for a little bit of advice here. And what your first question, what it brings to mind is Canada's financial watchdog, FinTrack, does put out these fact sheets and alerts to our, they're supposed to be our financial gatekeepers. Unfortunately, that system, as the Cullen Commission found, is completely, useless, unfortunately. But what they do, at least, they for bankers, for casinos, for jewel dealers, and others, notaries, I think, they'll give them a list and say, hey, if someone comes into your office and they say they want to buy this mansion, but they can't show you what their occupation and source of income is, or they say they're a student or a housewife, here's a flag. You see where I'm going. FinTrack puts out alerts with all these indicators. I think it's a great point that municipal councillors, provincial, politicians should not just have to, federal politicians complain that, when CSIS comes and talks to them with these briefs about, hey, maybe you should watch out for that former, China daily editor that you now have as an advisor in your office. Maybe he's a problem. This is told kind of verbally to politicians, and politicians, I guess they have deniability. They complain that these alerts are not standardized. So yes, it's a great idea. We have to fix a couple of problems. Right now, CSIS is only supposed to, report to its federal government client. So this has already come up a little bit in reporting, and I'm going to suggest it'll come up a lot. It'll soon come up more. CSIS cannot go directly to municipal councillors such as yourself and say, look, that person that came in on a junket looking to invest in the port, we know that they have connectivity to an underground banker down in Vancouver. Watch out, especially watch out if they're coming in and offering campaign funds, or saying, maybe at worst, let's be a little lighter on our, foreign investment requirements. So not to ramble on, yes, we should have these kind of alerts for all for all politicians at all levels, because my main point here is that the federal inquiry now that we're having is only focusing, I believe, on the last two federal elections, but this is a threat that's connected up and down the political system, and CSIS legally really isn't even supposed to be talking to you and giving you those warnings. So we need the fact sheet you're talking about with the indicators, and we need a new system where Canadian intelligence can be given to politicians at all levels, and even more importantly, can be enforced at all levels, because we don't have either. So another great question on the human trafficking. Look, I obtained documents to support my book that said that one of these individuals that, whose picture I just showed you a few minutes ago, back then, what the record said was, the largest gun collection or something like that, tremendous amount of prohibited and restricted firearms, involved in, poaching activities that connected to Chinese transnational crime. So this will hit home in your region, when you're losing bears and elk, and they're just being, sent abroad for a lot of money, more money in China. This individual I'm talking about was involved in that at a high level, and in human smuggling. So what I know, and we'll report more on in the coming days and weeks, is that these high-level operators involved in foreign interference, human smuggling, and underground casino activity especially, is an indicator, or rather a profile, characteristic of the highest level operators are involved in the smuggling of people, often Fujian province. Again, for those of you, recording and taking notes, Fujian province, a very important threat center for Canada in transnational crime, in the smuggling of humans, and in foreign interference and intelligence activity. And I'm saying, as my sources have informed me and in some ways taught me, all of those activities are combined. So for example, to end my answer, let's say you're a politician in Northern Toronto and you've got, your donations just skyrocket after a certain year, and all the records that we can read publicly say $400 from this individual from South China, $400, $400, $400. That what that is indicating to me, and hopefully this will come out more, is that an electoral district can be taken over by intelligence and organized crime, and people could be compelled to say, go donate to that politician or that riding, $400, bang, 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 bang. You have been, you were assisted in coming to this country from our boss in this electoral district. Now you're going to donate 400 and you can claim 300 of it for tax. We'll actually give you the 400. This is cash from our casino. So this is what I'm suggesting. It does all combine, and it's a major concern, and I'll have more documentation on that specific smuggling issue very soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. I would love to keep talking for hours, all sorts of questions to answer, but I know we're out of time here and we have a hard stop at 8:30. So I'd like to give you a warm applause and thank you for giving us your insight today. And I look forward to hearing more from you through the Bureau, and hopefully if you get a chance to come visit Prince George, we'd love to have you here in person.
Thank you, Sean, and everyone there and everyone online. It's been a real pleasure. And I too feel like we're just getting warmed up, and every question was so on point and relevant to my past, current, and future research. So I applaud you for those questions and this conversation, and hopefully we can do it again. And do come over to the Bureau, because I'm reporting on these issues weekly.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just look at one of those.